Telepathy. The power to control people's minds. Seeing things hidden from sight. Science or science fiction? What happens if this power falls into the wrong hands? Or is used as a weapon in warfare? Find out in the fifth dimension as we use science to unravel the truth behind telepathy. January 1971. As Apollo 14 strikes out for the moon, on board an astronaut is secretly planning a very different kind of mission. 200,000 miles from Earth, astronaut Edgar Mitchell is hoping to transmit symbols across the wastes of space, using only the power of his mind.
I focused on the symbol, became the symbol. Resonated with the symbol.
Mitchell's experiment was the first interstellar telepathy ever tried. But would it ever succeed? Telepathy, the power to read minds, predict the future, and see things without using our normal senses. Something that flies in the face of the known laws of science. Many animals have a sixth sense. Snakes can detect minute changes in their environment using only their tongue. Lone wolves can keep in touch with the pack over vast distances. Could these senses exist in humans, hidden deep in our brains? Based in San Francisco is the government-funded Cognitive Sciences Laboratory. Scientists here study psychic or psi anomalies. They're trained to be skeptical, but even some of them take telepathy seriously. James Spottiswoode is professor of physics and well-known critic of the paranormal.
There are experiments in telepathy, or in the ability of people to transmit information from one person to another over a distance, which are extremely carefully done and very well researched in very carefully done statistics, and there is evidence from those experiments that such effects do exist.
Enough evidence to lock the American and Russian intelligence services in psychic warfare. January 1991. Operation Desert Storm is underway. While the Allied forces are destroying Saddam's regime in Iraq, a different kind of war is being waged back in America. A secret US unit is in operation at Fort Meade, near Washington. This is Operation Stargate, a highly confidential unit with an extraordinary mission: to spy on the enemy by using telepathy or remote viewing. Director of the project, Dale Graff.
There were tasks that had to do with locating Scud missiles, or whatever the missiles were called then. Predictions of certain strikes, which in one or two cases I know were accurate. We did predict.
Top target was enemy of the hour, Saddam Hussein. Major Ed Dames is a former Psi agent. His task in Operation Desert Storm, to pinpoint Saddam's location using only his mind.
Oh, yes. There was a task force sitting off the coast with special operations ready to go in 10 minutes notice, wherever we or the Mossad told them Saddam Hussein was.
Psi agents have been working inside the US military machine for the past 20 years. It's a hard job to explain to outsiders. A lot of what they did is still classified, and sometimes even they don't really know how their strange powers work. For 17 years, Lieutenant Joseph McMoneagle was a psychic spy and superstar of the Stargate unit.
We don't last too long in the kind of job that I was doing. And I had lasted a lot longer than most, so they called me in and interviewed me. After being interviewed, the second thing they did was have me tested to make sure that I was stable and not crazy. That's a pretty good idea.
In the Vietnam War, McMoneagle had been a point man, a role where his powers had been stretched to breaking point.
You know, when you're in a very stressful situation and you have to make a decision, it's a life-death decision. You know, sometimes you have to go with your intuitive side, and it's kept me alive more times than not. To the point that other people would start trusting me more than not in making those decisions.
Having a sixth sense is a potent weapon on the battlefield. For a squad navigating through enemy territory, survival can depend on predicting ambush or danger ahead. The point man goes ahead as a lookout. In the stresses of war, the American military recognized that some men had a stronger sense of danger than others. McMoneagle's sense for danger was honed in Vietnam, and it changed his life forever.
As a result of that experience from that point on, I suddenly knew what people were thinking. I started knowing things before they could happen. I could hear conversations going on in the next room, which you couldn't possibly hear. I was seeing things that were going to happen the next day before they happened. I just started knowing things. They were like having clear pictures going on in my brain.
In 1975, while the Cold War was still driving military thinking, the CIA secretly set up the first Psi unit. Few outsiders even knew of its existence.
I could not give our product, our information, to the right people that needed it, because they were not allowed to know about the existence of the program. So I would sneak it out and take it to the laboratories and other scientists that work for DID, and pass it to them under the table. And I'd say, don't ask where this came from.
One aim was to locate telepathically military bases in the Soviet Union. Agents were trained in various ways of visualizing or remote viewing different targets. Sometimes they were given coordinates for a location, or pictures hidden in sealed envelopes. The task was to draw accurately what they could see only in their minds. How is it done? It seems to defy rational analysis.
I empty my mind and then I center my mind as well as I can. I then open my mind to whatever information is necessary to answer what the expectation is. The information most of the time comes in many different fragments. It's usually very difficult to understand. You have to try to build a picture out of it.
Now, we can't really, at this point, explain ESP, psi, remote viewing from a conventional scientific point of view. It's there, we just don't quite know where to look for it yet. But the brain knows how to do it.
Each idea appears to exist as a pattern of information. So we tune our radio, our oscillator, into that particular pattern, and we lock onto it.
One of Stargate's top priorities was Severodvinsk, a closed city at the heart of the Soviet armaments industry. In 1979, the CIA were desperate to know what was being built inside its enormous marine bunkers. The most sophisticated spy planes were useless against the walls of concrete. So the CIA called in a different kind of expert.
The National Security Council came to us and asked us if we would take a look at in the very northern part of the Soviet Union.
We were using coordinates at the time. So Joe had no idea what these coordinates meant, because even if he had looked at a map, we were interested in the buildings that are down there that don't show up on the map.
What was about to happen was extraordinary.
Looking in the building, remote viewing-wise, I get an impression of lots of bright lights, two very large cigar shapes, and some unique welding methodologies. I had a sense that there were two very large hull shapes that were being welded side by side, which kind of threw me a little bit because I had never seen two hull shapes being put together like that. And basically, they're being put together this way.
What McMoneagle visualized appeared to be accurate. The shapes he described matched what the Russians really were building. An Ekola-class submarine, the biggest in the world. But the US authorities were skeptical. John Alexander was commander of the US Intelligence and Security Command. He asked Marine engineers to assess McMoneagle's report. At first, they dismissed it.
That was truly spectacular. And again, it is a good example of our unwillingness to believe. What Joe had done is, of course, had spotted this unique submarine being built, and the information was passed to our boat builders, who just said, you can't do that. I mean, it's got to be nonsense, because anything that big, if it went down to depth, would be crushed. So we just discounted it because we didn't know how to do it.
But the naval experts were wrong. The Ekola submarine turned out to be the ultimate weapon of mass destruction. Capable of launching long-range missiles from any depth and carrying up to 200 nuclear warheads, it confirmed NATO's worst fears, that Russia was winning the arms race. The operation was a triumph, attracting government support for more psi operations. It's still viewed as one of the best remote viewing experiments ever. But while one remote viewing exercise might be a hit, the next might be a complete miss. For conventional scientists, this poses a serious problem. Professor Ray Hyman is a leading psychologist who spent many years assessing science and the paranormal.
The gold standard of all science is independent replication. And this is where parapsychology has fallen. Even when they've gotten results by their own standards, which they think are good, they have been unable to consistently replicate them.
But in the icy depths of the Cold War, American intelligence services could not afford to be skeptical. Russia was outperforming America. Her military parade sent a clear signal to the world that the Soviet Union was winning the race. Kremlin would do anything to stay ahead of the game. Oleg Kalugin was a general with the KGB. He knew how much serious interest the agency was taking in the paranormal.
From the early stages of the Cold War, the Soviet scientific community, supported, financed, and inspired by the KGB and the Defense Department of the USSR, they would provide monies for research and, well, look for what may come out of it. So that was the beginning.
The KGB had become particularly interested in an experiment that had taken place in the 1960s. An experiment which suggested that the paranormal might have something to offer. Karl Nikolaev, an actor and journalist, successfully switched a light on purely by the power of thought.
It's outside the philosophy we preached and we practiced. And yet our scientists decided that we have to have another look at. Maybe there was something. And indeed there were people who we found who had natural, mental powers, extraordinary power.
Nikolaev also claimed to be able to communicate telepathically over long distances. His achievements have still never really been explained. In 1998, an American team filmed this experiment. On camera, Nikolaev met with Dr. Stanislav Popov for the first time. Popov, a well-known medium, was given a sealed envelope with instructions in it that he was to communicate to Nikolaev telepathically. He was to take a small statue of Lenin from the chest of drawers and place it on the table.
Еще вперед. Вперед. Думай. Так, сюда. Ленин. Так, Ленин. Идем.
The film crew was sure the two men had no way of communicating, and Nikolaev carried out the instructions to the letter.
На стол. На стол.
People with these extraordinary abilities would be used to look for the crime, looking for some people who disappeared, or, I don't know how successful they were, but at least experiments were, conducted in my time and afterward.
The Russians set up a top-secret program of research. One experiment tested mental links in animals. Female rabbits, separated from their young, had their brainwaves measured. In another room, the baby rabbits were killed. According to researchers, the results were consistent. The mother's brain activity increased dramatically at the time of killing. The information was carefully leaked to the CIA. As Dale Graff explains.
It was part of the Cold War scenario where, hey, there's something going on in a communist country. Regardless of what we may think of it, let's take a look at it and see how credible it is. And first of all, to determine, is it real? What might it do to or for us? And if it is, then can we apply it as well?
But while American government interest in the paranormal was cautious, one leading scientist decided to secretly enter the race. In 1971, astronaut Dr. Ed Mitchell planned to carry out the ultimate telepathy experiment: thought transfer from space.
I had been reading the literature of parapsychology and realized there wasn't an explanation in classical science. And I realized that if this was real, science was very negligent in not working to find out what is the reality here. And so the moon flight seemed like a perfect opportunity to experiment at a great distance.
Mitchell was part of the crew of Apollo 14, which was aiming to spend one day on the moon. He was determined to do his experiment as far from Earth as man had ever been. Mitchell had taken with him a set of Zener cards, often used in telepathy experiments. His aim was to communicate the symbols back to collaborators on Earth. He intended to do it during the scheduled rest periods fixed in their program.
I would concentrate on each symbol for 15 seconds, while my colleagues in the United States would attempt to write down what they thought the symbols were. I focused on the symbol, became the symbol, resonated with the symbol, so that presumably the people in the United States could resonate with me and in some way pick up that, which with amazing accuracy they did.
But the conditions and results of Mitchell's experiments have been questioned. Liftoff was late and the schedule was changed, so his Earthbound recipients did their part of the test at the wrong time. Even so, 2 of them got a quarter of the answers right, higher than the laws of chance. Back on Earth, Mitchell took his results to parapsychologist Joseph Banks Rhine.
He was the leading research figure in my history as I started studying this, and the one with the best credentials, the one with doing the most work, the most credible work, and the most scientific outlook and perspective. No nonsense, just good, hard science. And so it was natural that I would turn to him.
Based at Duke University, North Carolina, Rhine had been carrying out his research since the 1930s. Rhine spent 30 years trying to explore the paranormal through scientific means. Mitchell's space experiment was based on one of Rhine's designs. Sitting on either side of a screen, the subject tries to turn over whichever card the controller has picked and passed on telepathically. Here, a mother and child are tested for links. Using statistics, Rhine wanted to show that something more than chance was happening in his lab and on the Apollo 14 mission.
Chance could have produced this result out of 1 out of 3,000 experiments, which is pretty good t-value, statistical value.
But Rhine's methods came under fire from scientists like Ray Hyman.
The main methodological flaws that people criticized Rhine for was that his cards were not well controlled. He used hand shuffling methods, which we now know don't really truly randomize. And one of the weaknesses of parapsychology is that they do rely completely on statistics to decide whether the phenomena are real or not. Unfortunately, statistical tests by themselves tell you nothing. Even if you get a departure that's real from, once you show that the chance wasn't the real reason why it was there, it doesn't tell you what was the reason. And it could still be a very normal reason. Some of these criticisms he tried to meet. He tried to now correct his methods. But as he corrected methods according to criticisms, the size of his effect kept going down, getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it looked like by the time he was going to do these things completely right, there was going to be nothing left.
If some Americans were skeptical, the Russians weren't going to give up. Secret pictures of a parapsychology research institute in Moscow showed that this was a serious business. But was this real science, or an elaborate hoax intended to confuse and distract the Americans?
It was sort of you might call it a psi race. And the problem that we had was getting credible reports out of the Soviet Union, because it doesn't take very much to hide a remote viewing or a parapsychology lab.
Rumors of Soviet projects became wilder and wilder. Telepathic killings, teleportation, mind control. The CIA realized this was a race they had to join. They focused on the Stanford Research Institute. Hal Puthoff was a physicist there. In the 1970s, the CIA employed him to start research on telepathy.
When the CIA first approached us, what they brought with them was documentation, which was absolutely, to me, mind-boggling. It was hundreds of pages listing dozens of high-level Soviet institutes that were putting full-time effort on this. Well, to be honest, I was shocked. I really didn't expect this. And I have to admit that even after 13 years of being in charge of the project, which grew into a multi-million-dollar project, still, toward the end, every time I'd go into an experiment, I'd say to myself, what am I doing here? This can't possibly work. So it certainly cut across the grain.
The main method he used was the double-blind method. A sealed envelope was taken from a locked safe and given to a subject, in this case, Puthoff himself. Inside the envelope, on a folded paper, a location was written. The subject would then drive to the destination inside. In a wire cage back in the Institute sat a viewer with a guard. The cage was to prevent the possible influence of electromagnetic waves. In this experiment, Puthoff's destination was a nearby yacht harbor. The remote viewer drew a picture of what he visualized from reading Puthoff's mind. Time and again, the viewer got it right.
We put remote viewers on submarines, for example, and take them into the ocean to where we had enough seawater shielding, which is a conductive shield, which should shield electromagnetic signals, even at very low frequencies. And they would still perform admirably. So not being able to pinpoint a mechanism was always something that was swimming around the back of my mind, and was still a challenge.
I get a sense I want to associate the individual.
Individuals that have good remote viewing talent may be able to describe many times, in fact most of the time, very well the remote scene or the remote object, but they may not know what it is. So the point is the seeing is not the same as the knowing. So the interpretation, to me, is still a big issue.
It was an ongoing problem. In this experiment, the location was a swimming pool in San Francisco. The viewer saw water and pools, but identified the open-air swimming pool as a water treatment plant. Seeing something that they couldn't identify often happened in the Stargate experiments. Were their accurate results just lucky guesses? Even more worrying was news that the Russians were making sinister progress.
There was a KGB defector, Nikolai Kokolov, who had come out, and he talked about experiments of fracturing spinal cords and actually using this literally as a weapon.
Like a villainous Bond character, Kokolov had worked as an assassin for the KGB, carrying out his attacks using a handgun camouflaged as a cigarette packet. After defecting to the US, he helped set up a unit to monitor paranormal research in the Soviet Union. Kokolov claimed to have found disturbing results.
The most important power of people, might, is about to be controlled by sophisticated, incredible, science fiction-like devices manufactured by the people in the Soviet Union.
I think of concern were reports of remote influence, and that the ability to actually take these capabilities, not just observe, but to influence the target.
In 1978, the KGB chose the Grand Masters chess tournament as a public testing ground for remote influence. The young Grand Master Anatoly Karpov was set against the Russian defector Viktor Korchnoi. In the audience sat a KGB agent, Dr. Zukar. His orders were to use telepathy to distract and handicap Korchnoi during the match.
That man had these born capabilities, and the man was also trained to enhance his ability to influence people at a distance. And he did use it. And Korchnoi, when he complained, he was absolutely right.
Korchnoi demanded that Dr. Zukar be thrown out of the tournament rooms. But his pleas were ignored. After a number of intense rounds, Korchnoi lost narrowly. As far as he was concerned, the KGB was responsible for his defeat.
I came to Philippines to play, well, 1 against 1. I was not quite right. The whole Red Army against me. And in the charge of the army, not Baturinski, Zuhar.
All of them were decorated, including that doctor, because of his super abilities to influence and actually to help Russia win the chess championship. Well, probably what Karpov would win anyway, but in this particular case, the Soviet KGB helped him win the championship.
A year later, Russia and America meet for the SALT I summit. For the US, it's particularly tense. Secret Russian reports suggest the KGB plan to use remote powers to influence high-ranking officials. Could the American president be in danger?
Influence would have been probably a better way to do it, because if you kill a president and somebody else comes in who is an unknown, it's better if you've got control of something, a person or a system that belongs to a threat or an enemy, to use it so that you still can manipulate it rather than to kill it.
In spite of the mutual mistrust, the two superpowers reach a historic agreement to limit strategic atomic weapons. Although the nuclear risk was reduced, other parts of the arms race continued. John Alexander gives the picture.
Everything that you developed, be it remote viewing or a new tank, had to be based on a threat. And so one of the ways of getting programs going and supported was to say, oh, you gotta watch out, because they got a better widget coming over there.
And for the US, hostilities were emerging in other places. November 79, Iran. Islamic students stormed the American embassy and took more than 50 US hostages. Stargate was called in.
It was extremely debilitating over a period of time. It lasted for over 10 months, and it was 64 people, and it was the same target, and we had to keep going back to it over and over and over.
Hal Puthoff recalls the first breakthrough.
While the remote viewer was giving the medical description, he said, you know, this fellow is so sick, he should be in a hospital, but he's not in a hospital. And not only that, but I see him on a plane in a few days, and he practically dies from the vertigo of being in this plane. So anyway, we just sent all that information off.
Shortly afterwards, a hostage is released for medical reasons. Coincidence or genuine remote viewing, and a much-needed success for Stargate.
They did acquire very accurate information, including, you know, the health status of one of the individuals and the note that he was going to be unexpectedly released, and that happened within a 24-hour period after the viewers had noted it and predicted it.
But for every psychic victory, there have been failures. 3 years later, a case comes up in Verona, Italy. The highest-ranking American NATO officer was abducted from his home, General James L. Dozier.
I was jumped from the rear, spun around, and I was looking down the barrels of 2 silenced pistols. A fight started, which I very quickly began to lose. And pretty soon they hit me on the head and fell to the floor. Then they brought a trunk, put me in the trunk, and took me away. They said several times that we're the Red Brigades. I heard that, but I wasn't sure whether they were going to kill me or hold me for ransom or what.
Stargate agents are quickly called in to help visualize Dozier's location. But it wasn't going to be a straightforward job, and the clock was ticking.
The track record of the Red Brigades was keep them a few weeks and then you find them in the river, so there wasn't a lot of time. And naturally we got into this, the remote viewing group at Fort Meade and many others around the world.
I think it was about 4:30 a.m. in the morning. And when they called me, they told me not to listen to any radios and watch no television, just come right to work. I was in a room that was painted all gray. The walls were all gray, the rug was gray, the table was painted gray. You actually get dizzy trying to stand up in this room. If you can imagine, everything was gray, light gray. I lay back in the chair and just closed my eyes and imagined myself at 100,000 feet looking down over the area of Italy. And what came to me was this portion of Italy where Padova lies. I imagined myself actually seeing streets and a road map and then standing in front of the building that he was being held in and looking up at the face of the building. It's almost like you can see him through a wall. You know, it's like you can see through things. You just feel him through a wall. You're just drawn there. I don't know how to explain that. We had another person who said that he was being held inside of a tent inside that apartment.
"42 days after his abduction, an Italian special unit finds General Dozier and releases him, alive and well. Just as the Stargate viewers had described, Dozier had been in Padova, isolated by his jailers in a tent. If just a coincidence, these were astonishingly accurate guesses. But Stargate is absent from Dozier's account of his release.
I just can't tell you what a superb job the Italian police did. But they did it with just good, solid police work.
Did Dozier's release owe more to a Red Brigade defector than the psychic spies at Fort Meade?
The Italian police told me the day that I was rescued that psychics had been involved, but after 4 weeks, they didn't even want to talk to a psychic, that they had so many false leads that they just dismissed them.
Dozier's case highlights the difficulties Stargate faces. Too many misses, and people quickly lose faith and patience.
Right after the general was abducted, there were a lot of diverse inputs coming in from all over. And we could see there was no good pattern, so how do you really know what to put the emphasis on? So even though some reports got out, they weren't the ones that were officially sanctioned through our place. But it wasn't until later on, halfway through the 6-week period that he was held captive, that the data tended to come together.
Despite the clarity of McMonagle's vision, a high-profile case like Dozier's puts Stargate and its methods under scrutiny. How many times had they failed? How many times had they succeeded? It's information which still remains largely classified.
You don't particularly want to advertise just how well or how good or maybe not so good these capabilities are. You'd rather that be an element of surprise or
the operational side, there was nothing that could be recognized, that could be evaluated scientifically, because they had no controls. We don't know exactly what the remote viewers were told, how much information they had, how much they could guess just by lucky means, you know, and by just reasonable means, because, you know, they're not going to be asked about ordinary things and the kinds of questions they're going to be asked and the problems are going to be given. You know, given that many of them had intelligence backgrounds, they probably could guess somewhat of what's going to be involved.
Even then, Stargate managed to divide scientists. Professor Jessica Utz from the University of California was also part of the review.
Hyman and I both agreed that there was something in the data that could not be explained by chance alone. And I think we disagreed in terms of what the ultimate explanation will be. So we saw results that can't be explained by chance. In other words, people were guessing at better rates than they should have been able to guess if just by chance.
Despite the debates, Stargate had chalked up more misses than hits. And in 1995, the Pentagon shut the operation down. The Russian operations were also allegedly cancelled. Oleg Kalugin believes otherwise.
These experiments continued in the 90s. Well, I do not know if they do it now, but I would not be surprised. They may have resumed these experiments, because this is something which indeed is not just madness. It's a real thing, and it needs to be sort of explored and probably put into practical use once those who are in power feel that it is necessary.
Edinburgh, Scotland. Although the military are no longer in the driving seat, the study of telepathy goes on. The university where Sherlock Holmes' creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, once studied, is home to the Koestler Institute of Parapsychology. The experiments were run by Professor Robert Morris, who believed the results were promising.
It does not look as though chance is the explanation. It looks as though there's a genuine effect there.
Under scientific conditions, thought transference is being thoroughly investigated.
It looks as though we found additional ways that people can get information in from the world around them through something that might be analogous to a new sense, but maybe something more direct than that. This is the way it looks. Exactly what process is going on, of course, that remains to be seen.
Known as the Ganzfeld procedure, the experiment shows a short film to a transmitter party. A receiver party sitting in a separate, soundproof room must try to visualize the images from the film.
Plane flying through the sky, clouds.
Both parties are linked only by headphones to the person monitoring the experiments.
There's people walking through the woods.
The results aren't always successful, but intriguingly, subjects who are more creative score more hits.
In the Ganzfeld procedure, we find that we get our best results if, in fact, we pre-select people who are very skilled at being artists or musicians. If we add together all of those people that we've worked with, we've had about a 40% success rate, where you'd expect just 25 by chance.
But is this hard science, or just pure coincidence?
We try to apply as many of the standards of present-day science as we possibly can. We try to design our studies so that the interpretations of them are fairly straightforward.
With the Gansfeld experiments, it's the same problem with all the other parapsychological experiments. The main problem is that it so far no one has been able to show consistent pattern of results that could be independently replicated.
Proving telepathy really works is a difficult road to travel down. But despite scientific controversies, thousands believe in the psychic powers of the mind. And today, Stargate's legacy lives on in its own small way. Now retired from his post as Psi agent, Ed Dames remains a firm believer in his paranormal talents and runs his own psychic detective agency on the island of Hawaii. Today, he's trying to locate a missing body. Using remote viewing, he thinks he's found the spot, out on a beach in the north of the island. Using psychic powers to try and solve crimes is still used by many law enforcers across America. But does it actually work? In this case, no body was turned up.
We would regard this as something that is not supernatural at all, that it is part of the natural world, using laws of physics and biology and psychology that we just yet don't completely understand.
As science reopens the door into the unknown, the world has entered into a new era. With the Cold War over, we now live with a new threat. A world order where terrorists, dictators, and weapons of mass destruction remain dangerously hidden from view. In the fight against terrorism, could we be entering a new era of psychic warfare? In 2003, Joe McMoneagle confirmed that he was asked to help in the search for Saddam, but he would not reveal by whom. Telepathy may defy scientific explanation, but for many, it is a reality. From the race for supremacy in the Cold War to the age of terrorism, it remains a mysterious skill that could radically change our future. As we continue to explore telepathy, the boundary between science fiction and science fact may one day become blurred. If we were to prove its existence, the possibilities seem endless, and who knows where the journey of our minds could end.